What is up, everyone?
How's it going? How's
Oh
it
man,
going, Matt?
we are live. I am live from my normal place.
I'm
Sam,
live at I'm at a Starbucks in Lumberton, North Carolina, halfway between Wilmington and Charlotte. I only made it halfway today. I did not get home.
nice. You were with one of the partners that we work with. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, we were out at Drip Coffee, talking about management. We had a million post-it notes on the wall, talk about management leadership. It was great. Um, but 4 hours from Charlotte, so you know, long
Driving
drive.
it. What? So I don't know. For people unfamiliar with Drift, who is Drift? What is Drift all about?
Good question. Drift is, to me, it is my favorite coffee shop on the East Coast. It's a mixture of coffee shop and kitchen. So it was started by two brothers, surfers, professional surfers who have been around the world surfing. So really cool backstory. But they're from Wilmington, North Carolina. And when they got home, they were like, hey, we got all this awesome food and coffee as we go around the world surfing that doesn't exist in Wilmington. Let's make that. Like, let's bring a little bit of piece of that world here. That was the start. Now they've got 12 locations. They're on the way to 15. And it's like, it's beautifully designed. It's Australian coffee as the root, and then whole ingredients, food that's good for you, tastes delicious and good for you, which is like, I don't know, it fits with yours and my ethos around food and the way that, things should be going. So it's a brand that has a cool backstory, really prides themselves on really good coffee, and then just trying to serve food that's good for people at the same time. So a really cool story all combined into one.
Nice. For those that don't know, Sam is I mean, and this is not a bad thing. A coffee snob. Is that like appropriate?
I mean, those that don't know would call me a coffee snob. Those that know would say Sam's got really good taste in coffee.
Sam just likes his coffee and yeah, into it. Knows the difference between really good coffee and average coffee.
And
Um,
and no shots fired, but I'm at Starbucks here.
he's
I'm
at a
I'm a
Starbucks.
common man's coffee. I could do it all. I could drink it all.
Totally. I'm drinking Intelligentsia right now, my favorite
Ooh,
on the West Coast. Um,
this is actually big debate. Um, you go hard G on intelligentsia.
oh,
Is it? I don't know the answer. I honestly don't know the answer, but I probably because I'm a coffee snob call it intelligentsia.
no way.
It
No
might
way.
just be me. That might be party of one. I don't know the right answer though.
I'm getting hints of cacao in my intelligentsia.
100%.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, that's cool. That's exciting. The work that yeah, that we're doing with Drift and to see them grow is very cool and kind of
It
doing it
is
right.
cool. That is. And it's cool because, yeah, they believe in the food side, but they also believe in the people side, which is how we got into it. And they were like, hey, we really care about our people, or people care about the brand. How do we grow the right way and develop leaders from within, which has been the whole premise. And it's also what we're talking about today, which is great because I think, as you and I've seen, they're not the only ones talking about it. This is the name of the game in the industry. It's exactly what they're trying to do. So
That's awesome. Um, yeah, so speaking of the topic for the day, today we are kind of diving into just this discussion around promoting managers from within and developing leaders from within an organization. We don't necessarily have a spotlight today. Sam is in a Starbucks, so just if his Wi-Fi goes out and he suddenly disappears, that's why. But he'll be back.
I'll get
Right?
back on real fast.
Okay. Yeah,
Bear
but we're
with us.
live. What up? What up, LinkedIn? What up, YouTube? What up, Zoom? We're live in all the places. So thank you for joining us. Um, so we kind of have this like based on our experiences with the brands that we've been working with over the last few years, but also our time working at Chipotle, this brand that was sort of well known and famous for developing leaders within. We just really have seen it work both ways. And we've seen it work on where maybe people have gone too far. We've seen it work where people have not done it enough. And we sort of have this idea, this belief that there's sort of a sweet spot of promoting managers from within. So this is my extremely crude Can we see it? Is it working?
It's a little blown out. I'm going to blow you up for everybody. That white. Oh, there it is. There it is.
There it is.
Let it
This
roll.
is
That's
like a
great.
scale, okay? Managers promoted from within. So bad, so bad. But I have it here, and you can see there's sort of this like scale of like maybe like the internal rate, like a metric of like 10% of your managers are promoted from within or developed from within, all the way up to here, right? And so at Chipotle, we were able to sort of like really sit at this world where it was around this like 80% mark, okay? Right around here. But we also found kind of in like the heyday of Chipotle when it was like really, really big on like sort of this like internal culture. Like there was a time when we were kind of up here on the 90% mark. And what we found at that like higher end, like 90, 95% mark was like it was a little bit inbred. Like there wasn't new blood coming in, there wasn't new life, there wasn't new ideas. It was sort of like too enmeshed in its own ideas. But when we saw it around this 80% mark, right around here, if you can see it, it's so hard to do backwards. We did this last week. Right around this 80% mark, seemed to be the sweet spot. Anything less than that meant like in our experience and in our opinion, a less strong brand, a weaker brand because you're bringing in people who don't know the culture, you're bringing in people who don't know how to run the business. You're also spending more time attracting talent than developing talent. And so what we've really found is that to be in kind of the sweet spot of where we think a brand is strongest in an internal culture and in developing people is right around that 80% mark. And so that's why we call it the 80% club. And just this idea that brands who live in the 80% club are doing the best kind of business, doing the best kind of people development, and it's not just best for their brand and for their business, but best for the community and best for the people that they're bringing into the brand as team members.
That's right. And it's it it's a spectrum for a reason. Like I think on paper you would be like, hey, wouldn't it be great if all of your managers were trained from within? And I think that's why we put it in the spectrum because we were like, actually, there's a downside to all of your managers coming from within, which you just outlined. I think for most brands, though, 80% is like a pipe train. It's like 80% of your leaders of all, and we're talking all leaders. This is your GM, your hourly managers from within.
Right.
80% of all of them inside of the store are coming from within. And at Chipotle to do that, when you think about the numbers, it's almost like a math equation then. We had we called 1,000 restaurants. We had way more than that. There's 3,000 now. But say at 1,000 restaurants, you've got 4 managers per restaurant. Like 80% of them were developed from within. That's thousands of leaders. And so to do that, it takes a system to develop thousands of leaders from within. So because that's so hard to do, what we find is most brands are struggling on the lower end of that spectrum. They sit in that 10, 20, 30. Wouldn't it be nice if, because that's hard to do to create a system that pumps out that many good leaders that can run your restaurants from within. And so I think that becomes the struggle of you can go too far. There's this ideal world, but most people live in these early stages where it's really hard to get the momentum going and the engine and the system that actually pumps out that kind of talent.
And it's obviously like this is like the most obvious thing to say, but this is not something you do overnight. This is not something that you instill and create overnight. It's so I think of it like brand building, like brand awareness. Like when people think of branding, they're always like, well, what's the ROI on branding? If I do this like branding work, it's such a like difficult thing to measure. Um, but we know that it works. We know that it's the right thing to do. We know that creating brand awareness for a brand is the way to go when it comes to marketing and growth and becoming established. And I think of being in that 80% club is the same idea as branding almost. It's building a culture. It's long-term internal brand building, and it's really focused on like this long-term growth, but it's not something that you just install overnight. And it's also something that's a little hard to measure, which is brand awareness is something that's hard to measure. Same as like internal development is a little bit hard to measure, but we know that it's the right thing for the business.
Well, and yet once you land on that 80% of leaders develop from within, all of a sudden you start to get a metric to leadership development, which is this like weird amorphous topic that everybody talks. I want to develop leaders. We want to get better at leadership development. What does that mean? It's very topical and kind of high level, but when you break it down and say, well, how many of your leaders have been developed from within? And of those, how many are top performing? If you can develop top performing leaders from within, have 80% of them as a quantifiable metric all of a sudden. Um, but I also love your brand because I feel like so many folks in marketing and brand, if you don't know the industry, you think of a rebrand as like, I'm going to change the colors. I'm going to swap out some
Right.
fonts. I'm going to update my website and boom, we have a brand redesign. But your
Right.
point is spot on. You can't, changing a brand and getting brand affinity and brand loyalty takes time. And just like that, you can't microwave culture. You can't put culture in the microwave and 60 seconds later it comes out. You can't hire somebody from the outside and 2 weeks later they're living and breathing your culture. Culture building takes time. You can't just slap something on it. You can't just hire a new person in and develop a leader. It's going to take some time to actually bring that culture to life.
Absolutely. Um, and so today we kind of want to walk through a little bit of kind of what a system might look like, and even kind of tee up a little bit of what we did at Chipotle and what we did, what we've even done with some brands since then, to sort of develop a system that fosters this internal growth. Because again, this is not the kind of thing that you come and you just turn on and happens overnight. It has to be intentional, and there has to be sort of a system that's underlying that supports it, that supports this kind of development. And so I know, again, like at Chipotle, when you started, Sam, because we were there collectively for about 10 years. But you started a few years before me. Like when you started, there really wasn't what we would call like a career path. There were stations, um, roles and responsibilities, but there wasn't like this like clearly defined path of how you get from here to becoming a manager, and then how another manager or how another field leader could develop other people in this like progressive, systematic fashion. And that was something that was built over the years, and that it still exists today. And I think that, sorry, I thought, can you hear me, Sam? You wouldn't mute.
I'm totally frozen. I can't. My internet is struggling right now. So
He's in Starbucks. He's in Starbucks. So I'm gonna pull up, Sam, if you come unfrozen, feel free to interject here. So basically, like I just said, like and I give Sam really a lot of the credit for building out the system at Chipotle. I'll say it. I'll say it if nobody else will. When Sam started, this wasn't there. This didn't exist. And he started out there and really took the lead over the years of like developing the system from crew to manager all the way to field leader. When started at Chipotle, it was books and binders, and there was like some things to do, but there was no path, there was no career path. But upon leaving, there was a clearly defined career path from crew member to shift leader to hourly managers to general manager, and then also a full blown university leadership development program for multi-unit managers, which is what we called field leaders. And so over the course of like 5 to 7 years, this whole program was developed systematically, and they still use it today. And I was just going to share this visual here. Um, this was Chipotle posted this last week. Um, when we say what is it, like what was the actual stuff? Well, it's more than just like tools and materials. It's a whole program, it's a whole system. But you can see that they're still using the career path tools that were introduced years ago. Things like station training checklists or training checklists for example here, a certified trainer, somebody who gets certified on training others and developing other people in the restaurant. And if you look at this is basically these books here, like line, grill, prep, porter, manager. These are the training books that were developed for the different stations and the different levels of managers that basically say what are your competencies, what are you supposed to be able to do, what are you supposed to be able to do, and what can be signed off on in order to progress to the next level, and here's how long it will take you, and really created a path for managers to grow from entry level all the way to leading a multi-million dollar business, and then eventually leading multi-million dollar businesses. And it's going to bring this up as well. And so when you visualize the whole thing, it looks like this. So this is basically the career path that was identified at Chipotle, from a crew to a kitchen shift leader, a service shift leader, like basically an assistant general manager, kind of a next level general manager, and then a field leader or a multi-unit manager. And so for all of these levels, all of this defined career path, again, there were competencies, there were clearly defined paths to get to the next level, and even clearly defined dollar amounts to get to each level. So all that to say that this is what was developed by the team that we worked with at Chipotle, and it's still being used today, as demonstrated by these photos that are being posted and that are being sort of like still kind of praised as the system that is the underlying process in the system to develop leaders from within. And the cool thing is that a lot of things have changed since we left. There's been three, maybe four CEOs.
I think three. Yeah.
Three CEOs from the time that we were there till now. A lot of things have changed, but this has remained the same. This is still being used. This is still the underlying system and the process for developing leaders. When there was one new leader that came in, and Sam, if you can hear, feel free to jump in.
I think I'm here now. I think I'm back. Who
Oh, he's
knows?
back. Well, there was one kind of problem when this was first sort of built and introduced and rolled out. That I think is just like such a great lesson learned that you experienced in like trying to introduce this to restaurants and trying to introduce this to leaders, to go from sort of a nebulous system of like, hey, we just like want to feel good, we want to make people get them going, we want to promote from within. That was always the ethos, but there was no structure to it. And so when this was introduced, in order to like provide some structure, there was a little bit of a misstep in introducing this to the organization. And tell us about that.
100%. Yeah. I mean, like, biggest misstep of my career. And I like the biggest lesson learned for a lot of people, that when I say it out loud, everybody watching is going to be like, yeah, obviously. But back in the day, like, it wasn't obvious. It didn't make sense. So the version you saw that Chipotle is using today is actually version 2 that we released. The first version that we put out was exactly as you said, that when we got in, there was a book for kitchen managers and a book for service managers. And it had a bunch of stuff that those managers needed to know. It was just the information they needed to know. Great exercises written by great leaders. Like, it was really good content. But as you get up, there was nothing to be an apprentice in the restaurant and nothing for general managers. We didn't write down any of that. And so that was the first goal, was to say, well, it feels like as a brand as big as we are, there should be training for the general managers that we're all using. So let's figure out what that is. Let's write that down. And then there needs to be a system for how do we teach the tools. So yes, we have a book that says this is what you need to do. How long should it take to finish that book? How long should it take to go step by step? So version 1 of the career path was trying to answer those questions. Let's build out a GM path. Let's take all the things the GM needs to know, or write that down, create the book. But then we need a way to teach and train this over time, because we were finding that some kitchen managers were finishing in 2 days and some were finishing in 2 years to get through the book. And so as you look across the enterprise, you're trying to figure out, well, how long does it take to train a kitchen manager? And so we had to get to an answer. So the first version of the materials that we just saw on LinkedIn that came out aimed to solve that. It was the apprentice book, and then each book had a week by week training plan. Where we totally failed, is this was done at the corporate office. It was a small room of people that decided that this was the thing to do. There was general alignment from the top. And the rollout and the release was to say, hey, this is coming. And our field leadership teams in restaurants literally got this new stack of books dropped at their doorsteps. So field leaders literally at their homes, it was sent to their houses on their doorsteps. And they were like, what is this? Because they weren't involved in the process. They weren't real. It wasn't a really thought through rollout plan. And the reason I found out they didn't think too highly of it is it was my job to go out after we wrote it and introduce it to the field, talk to them about it. And I will tell you, it was a humbling experience. Some were very kind about like, hey, we could really use some feedback. We've got some notes. How do we give feedback? How do we make it better? How do we help? There were others that were very frustrated and very upset and were not shy about letting me know how big of a miss this was. Just basically stopping in the middle and be like, who wrote this? What are their credentials? How did they get at these answers? Who signed off that said this is the thing? Because I've never heard it. My leaders never heard of this before. Where is this coming from? And it was a very like, looking back on it, of course, this is their job. This is their day to day. They're developing leaders, whether we send out a book or not, they're living it. And so for them to have not had a voice in it was a pretty frustrating experience for them. And for me, it was an eye-opening experience into not only the creation of the tools, because the tools themselves are still the tools that we're using today, some version of this. So they weren't inherently wrong. They could have been a lot better and improved. But to develop a system, it's not just books and tools out in the field. You need the buy-in of the people using it, and you need them living it and breathing it and holding their teams accountable to delivering on what's in the book and the utilization of it. And so in the end, super humbling, embarrassing, if I'm being honest, like one of the biggest mistakes of my career, but also the biggest lesson I've made. A lot of friends from that, because I think of what we did afterwards. We could have cowered in the back and said, I'm sorry, which I apologize profusely. We could have redone it, sent everything back, taken it back. Instead, we said, let's do it again. Let's rebuild it. Like, let's get the feedback. That's V1. That's the V1 rollout. Let's make V2 together. Let's create it. And that's what it was. And what it ended up creating was a whole network of really bought in leaders from around the country, because they were like, I don't want what happened last time to happen again. And they're asking me for my opinion. Now I want to give it. And so now all of a sudden I had people all over the country flooding me with input. Here's what we use over here. Here's what we use over here. Here's 10 ways to make this thing that we wrote better. So all of a sudden V2 became the entire country coming together to improve the operations. So then when we came back out with that version, we put a new cover on it. We rebranded it. So it looked a little bit different. But when we did it, now they were like, yes, this is more reflective. You had my buy-in for it. And so the lesson learned at the end is like, you've got to put it out there to get feedback no matter what. What our biggest lesson was we released this to the field without any input, without calling it V1 or even knowing it was V1. We thought it was pretty much ready. It taught us the value of getting input from your users, input from your learners. Honestly, though, it also taught me the input of just put it out there and get the feedback and be willing to take the heat and be willing to use the feedback and turn it around. Because when you do that, now you've got people bought in for life and bought into the system because they're a part of building the system.
Yeah. What was the time frame from that failed introduction to the next rev that was more bought into?
I think the literal books were, and I'm just estimating here, it's probably a year later.
Yeah.
Because what I didn't want to do was just rush something back out. It wasn't a speed exercise to just put it back out. It was like, well, let's get it right and let's use it and break it and get feedback. And so the big thing though, what we did in that time frame was I was in every market and our teams were in every market getting feedback, hearing from leaders on what they could do better, seeing their tools. So it was another year of research and using these tools. So in like a product launch phase, for those familiar with like product management, this was very much like testing and iterating phase. We just made the mistake of calling it complete when we launched it. But if we had gone into it saying, hey, this is the practice mode, We're
Yeah.
going to spend a year getting feedback and then release it. It would have worked the exact same way. It just wasn't released that way. It's very, very poor on the execution part. But about a year later, we came back out with version 2. That is literally the version that we're using today, that they're using today, and building off of, adding new roles, augmenting things like that.
Yeah. And I feel like, it even took, I don't know, maybe 2 years after that to sort of have even what I would call like almost like the biggest unlock, which was the certified trainer program. Um, like having a program that clearly defined who's responsible for that training system, or even a restaurant being signed off as certified in training and having individuals in the restaurant being certified in training and having a system and a process for them to actually know how to use the system. Because really, at first, it was really high, it was highly reliant on the general manager, which makes sense. And we want the general manager to know how to use it. Then I felt like the introduction a couple of years later of that certified trainer program really took it to the next level and brought just like a different level of like accountability that actually made the system be used. And so there was also not just this level of creating internal promotions, but also creating restaurants that were certified training restaurants, and were sort of the standard when it comes to maintaining standards, high execution of excellence, but also developing leaders from within and leveraging the system.
That's right. Because yeah, the original method relied entirely on general managers. And as all of us know, you have different stores in different stages. Not every store is at the stage that they can be investing in producing talent at a high level. Some of them are in a turnaround. There's a bunch of turnover. Something happens in the store. It's just kind of a mess. That's not the environment to be training future leaders in. They've got to focus on solidifying operations and establishing operations. So in that case, the certified training restaurant was the outlet. It was a place in the market to say, hey, we can still get leaders from a place that's really good at training to feed the other stores that need help versus every store fending for themselves.
I also feel like another unlock that kind of came later down the road. And it's funny because you were saying you were with Drift this week working
Yeah,
on this, but was just this idea of, I mean, developing what we call the top five, um, like basically the top five competencies or accountabilities for like a general manager and really for each station. Every single position in the career path was sort of lacking that in the original iteration, or it wasn't as clear. And I don't know when Scott, the current CEO, Scott Boatwright, came in as the chief operating officer, that was like kind of like one of his first like directives, in partnering with the training team and op services team to really develop these top five accountabilities per station and per job level.
that's right. And it really, I mean, it served as part of Scott's onboarding. Like as he's came in as the COO, and as he's coming in, he's trying to figure out like, well, what's the setup of Chipotle? Like who's accountable for what? Who does what in the restaurants? And so by virtue of that, Scott, to his credit, took all of the training. Scott spent almost 3 months in a restaurant in Atlanta before he came to the corporate office. And he went through every single station. He went through KM training. It was 4 weeks of KM training. It was 6 weeks of service manager training, and it was 6 weeks of apprentice training. And he went line by line, week by week through the exact training program. So he went through the thing that we just talked about, went through it individually, and then came back to the office and said, cool, it's great. We have a system. Here's what I'm confused about. In every version, AM, SM, apprentice, general manager, I got to learn 40 things, 50 things, which is true. And every brand that we've worked with since, same problem. Same thing I was just doing with Drift. Your job description is 40 things that you need a manager to do. Well, that's too much to remember. And so Scott's feedback was, if I do nothing else, there's got to be 3, 4, 5 things that matter more than everything else. So for a kitchen manager, somebody operating in the back of the house, food safety matters more than a bunch of other things. Like back there, if the place isn't clean, it doesn't really matter how the boxes are stacked in the back, right? In the order of priority, food safety matters more. So what we ended up doing was, I'm going to try to pull up here and see if I can share my screen without my internet crashing. We'll say
Doubtful.
doubtful indeed. But it was an exercise like this. This is what I literally just finished. That is why I'm stuck in a Starbucks right now. Um, you know what? We'll do it. We'll see if this pops up.
Oh,
Look at this. So
look at
what
that.
you're looking at is 10,000 post-it notes, but each color is a role. And so what we did was to lay out role by role, what are the expectations, and then group this. So purple here, you won't read the text, don't worry about reading it, but purple is their kitchen managers. And so what we're doing is grouping things together like feedback and coaching and hiring. All of those are people related skills. Or down at the bottom of the purples here, you've got inventory, ordering, and organization. That's all about your ordering mechanism. We did that for every single role. So purple's kitchen manager, green is their lead barista, red up top is your general manager, to try to organize what are all of the things we expect of this role, and then let's group them together to create the 3, 4, or 5 things that matter most. So that we're not saying there's 40 things to do. We're saying there's 5 things to do. And there's a couple things to do in each of those, but I need you to both place a good food order and count your inventory well and keep your place organized so that you can count. All 3 of those are a part of one responsibility. So this exercise is what we just did for Drift. It's exactly what we did for Scott. And so when Scott came in, it was almost like atoning for our sins of the previous rollout, where we brought Scott together and all of the regional leaders, and we
Yeah.
sat in a room, and I did exactly what you just saw. So this is the head executives of Chipotle with post-it notes. And I was like, write down what matters for a kitchen manager. And they all sat silently. They wrote down 10, 15 things that matter. And then we would put them up on the board and start grouping them together and have big debates of like, does that matter more than this? Is this really more important, or this is missing? And we spent a full day doing it, to the point where we ended up at the end of 24 hours with top 5s for every level in the restaurant to just organize what we had already. We already had long lists of things to do, but now we had simple ways to communicate. This is what matters most in your role. And we had every leader from Scott, the COO, to every regional leader aligned to it, leading the room in one day. And that became the impetus for, I think, why they're still using it today is they all believe in it. They all wrote what goes in the book. And I think that's the missing link. And it's not just having a book, it's really aligning and clarifying what goes in the book in the first place to really make it useful and accurate and effective.
Yeah, and I feel like the lesson learned, right, is to always just to start with that, which is what you said you doing with Drift this week, like before creating the materials, before creating the book, before creating the underlying system, which is tools and a process, right? That's a system, but like the actual thing is those top 5 accountabilities for each role, for each position, and really understanding who's responsible for what and what you should be competent at, because that's how you know, right? I mean, it's the most obvious thing to say, but it's like, here's how we know if this person can be this position, how they can be a kitchen manager. Are they effective at this, and these 5 things? Great, you're a kitchen manager. And starting with that is always step one. Um, Establishing that with the people who actually know what it's supposed to be. Especially in not making it in a vacuum, because like you said, we've seen that not work. We've seen creating in a vacuum, especially on the corporate level. It just never works. Like uh, we kind of learned the same lesson. I hate to say it. We sort of did the same thing with a different program with a little bit of like a field leader, a multi-unit manager development program, to the point where when we did like a practice week of it before it was actually introduced to the multi-unit managers, there was a group of regional training managers who came in to kind of take it, and they basically like rewrote it. They like rewrote the program during their week of like coming in and taking it as like a preview, which was to be expected. That was the idea. But it's like you have to start with those people. You have to start with the people who are living and breathing it, and never create something in a vacuum in the corporate office. Like that is the absolute number one worst thing you could do for introducing something to operators.
That's right. And I think the idea of sharing it and getting feedback is painful for two reasons. One, it's tough to get feedback. It's tough to put something out there and have people give their honest feedback and tell you it's wrong. And so there's a bit of ego that you have to get over to be okay with that. The second, though, is time. And I think in our industry, in the food industry or the restaurant industry, this is the number one thing we fight with literally every brand we talk to is investing the time to get it right. There's speed to urgency, and we're all kind of trained that way. Like I'm staring at a Starbucks right now where they are trained to just crank out drinks and get it out the line. And so when it comes to doing project work, it's like that's the mentality we're in: crank it out and get it out there. But to get it right, whether you are figuring out what the top five on the responsibilities are and making sure that you've got the right things to train on, or it's rolling it out effectively, taking 30, 60 days to ensure everybody's got it and digests it, or whether it's taking 6 weeks to train a kitchen manager, because that's how long it takes to have enough reps to really know they do it well. All of that takes time and patience. And I think that's the thing we fight more than anything in doing this well is investing the time and taking the patience to do it. When you do it, the results are profound. And I think that's the ultimate thing to get back to your 80% club, that the brands that invest the time to do it and to do it well are the ones that start sloping up that curve to the 80% because they're willing to invest the time. The ones that don't or keep cutting it short or keep trying to shortcut it are trapped in this never ending cycle down low where they're at 10, 20, 30% because they're just trying to rush through it. So they never actually do it well or never actually have the buy-in to create that ramp to 80.
What do you think is like the an organization looks like culturally, like for a brand that develops maybe 20, 15 to 20% of their managers are developed within versus 80% of their managers are developed within. Like culturally speaking, what's the difference between those two organizations?
It's a good question. I feel like you and I have seen enough brands to say that, like, I feel like, you tell me what you think. I feel like most brands stumble into 10 to 15%. It's like, if you're down that low, you're kind of like promoting from within out of desperation. It's like, we need a body, that person's there. And so we're pulling you up as opposed to like strategically training. Like there's really no system. It's more like, hey, we need a body. You're the next best person and I'm pulling you up. I feel like you stumble into 10 to 15% of your workforce falling into that bucket, whether you try to or not. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a 10 to 15% is like you're not trying to promote from within. That just happens, just like you're saying. I think the word desperation is really interesting. Like it's culturally speaking, it's a little bit of like just like always trying. But what you lose is you actually kind of lose the actual culture. Like it just becomes a new culture with every because we know that like managers are really like the culture
Yes.
bearers and like they're the ones who really maintain that and keep it. And so every time you're bringing in somebody new, you're bringing in a new culture, which there's nothing wrong with bringing in people from the outside. Like it works, it's good. Um, but when it's the majority of your brand, that means you're resetting your culture almost on an annual basis, it feels like.
It
Um,
makes so much sense. The math makes so much sense. You know, I love math, but like, yeah, if more than half of your leaders are coming from the outside, that means every turn you're diluting your culture.
yeah. I saw Philip raise your hand. Did you have something to throw out there, Philip? I can or was that a miss? Was that an accident?
He's just waving.
Okay.
Hit the
Nope,
wrong
hit the
button.
wrong button.
Well, hi, Philip. Good to see
Well,
you too.
I wave back. Um, I mean, if you had something you wanted to add about yeah, the internal culture. Yeah, I think that again, because again, culture is such sort of this like nebulous thing, right? Like brand awareness. But when you're living in that world where because if you've grown people from within, they are not just it's sort of like having a brand advocate, right? It's sort of somebody
Yeah.
who believes in the brand. That's somebody who kind of believes in the culture, I would say. If they've gotten to that point, that's somebody who's bought in. So that just has ripple effects across across the board and across the organization, hands
Well,
down.
especially if you've got like most brands that we work with have very particular values. They act
Yeah.
and operate a certain way. You have some that are like we were both in Denver. There's a very Denver vibe that you're trying to like capture and create with a lot of the local brands there. In Charlotte, very different vibe in Charlotte than in Denver. But like
Yeah.
it's a vibe. And so your values try to codify what that vibe is. If you're turning over managers repeatedly, that culture isn't in place versus, and I'll use a new market example. I think this is something we can all see that like you go to a new market that's away from your home base where all of your stores are, where all of your restaurant is. You're going to go to a new state. You've got two ways to go about it. You could go hire a bunch of people in that state and teach them your standards and get them up and running. And you can get them up and running pretty quickly and they can execute the standards of the store, but they don't have the culture. And you can give a presentation, you can watch videos, but they don't live it and breathe it because you can't microwave a culture, as we talked about. The alternative is to go open that store. You don't just send a training team, you send a whole management team. You have an internally developed general manager, an internally developed assistant manager, internally developed leaders of the departments, and you send all of them who have been living in your brands and they move to another state and your culture starts to matriculate from them. That's a very different world than just hiring 8 people from the outside and trying to teach them your standards. We get two very different results.
Yeah, I mean, 2 weeks ago, I was at the leadership conference for Din Tai Fung, one of our partners. I think they'd be okay with me saying this. It was and because I think this is something they would say publicly even, but they're growing rapidly across the country and moving into new states, new cities. They recently moved into Vancouver and Manhattan. They've got plans to move into Arizona, and their COO on stage literally just described what you walked through, that like when they opened up in a new city recently, they did the model where they went in and they just hired everybody from that city and taught them the standards. They have the playbook. They've got really great training. They taught them the playbook. They walked through it, and it was rough. Like they said, like it took time. It took a lot of time, and they had to right the ship. And he literally said, "We're not going to do it that way next time. Next time, we're going to move a management team to a new city, and we're going to ask them to learn the culture of that city instead of asking that city people that we hire to learn the culture of Din Tai Fung. They're going to export their culture from one strong restaurant into a new market. And just kind of the same idea that there's just this belief that promoting folks from within, and because the people that are moving to this new city are going to get replaced by people that are in that current city,
Yep.
and
Yep.
being developed from within. Because they've seen it. They've seen both ways, and they have this belief, and this from their experience, that promoting from within and developing leaders from within will maintain their strong culture. That is really what drives their business, and they're a very values driven organization, and that's where they've seen a lot of success.
And I think I think every single values driven organization that has a specific way they want to operate, not just cranking out food from a machine, but there's a way we want people to feel when they walk in here. Those are all brands that should be developing people from within because it's impossible to put somebody through a 6-week plan and expect them to just come out living and breathing your culture. If you really think about the best people that you're promoting from within at your brand, they've probably been there for a year or two. They've been in a system. They're not just going through training to spit out the other side. They've just been simmering in there. They spent 6 months working the front lines. Eventually, they became a manager and they've been there for a year or two as a manager. They've raised their hand and said they want to grow with you. They've been living and breathing your culture for years, and you've had the chance to vet them for years. Where if they wouldn't have worked out, or if they didn't have the it factor that you're looking for, you would
Yeah,
have moved on from them or they would have left. So now years later, they're opting to become the leader. You've had a 2-year interview process for that leader versus we're going to hold the job fair, hire the best person, and in 6 weeks expect them to deliver at the same level. It just doesn't, the math doesn't work out when you do it that way.
totally. Yeah, I know. Yeah, you keep coming back to math. Uh,
I'm going
it
to put up
really
the meme at some point of
the
the
net
hangover.
worth.
The
Yeah,
numbers
yeah,
and the hangover.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it does come back to math, right? Um, it comes back to metrics, and it makes the most like business sense. Um, yeah, to live in that 80% world, to live in that 80% club. Um, and so and I think that this, maybe next week we can really we will dive into sort of what the kind of simple system that we rely on to sort of like what that kind of looks like step by step to install that in a brand, like especially kind of a smaller brand, like maybe you're in, I mean, Drift Coffee is a really great example who we're working with right now. What it looks like to install a system, like step by step, like starting with what you're doing right now, which is identifying sort of those top accountabilities per job role. But what that step-by-step process looks like as far as like how to install an underlying system to successfully create a world where someone can move into the 80% club. Like if a founder, who has maybe two restaurants, maybe five restaurants, or even if it's not restaurants, if it's any brick and mortar retail business, it's in the hospitality world that has brick and mortar businesses that are being managed by people, what can they do to step into that world of being in an 80% club? Well, we kind of have like a system that we've developed, a process, a step-by-step process, and really a system across the board of what it might look like and what's sort of what it takes to have this underlying process to get people towards that 80% club, not overnight, but in sort of a long-term view. And next week we're really going to kind of walk through that and dive into what that looks like on a practical level.
Totally. I think that's the benefit of it. Of like we obviously started with Chipotle. That's what we started with there of how we built it. But now seeing it across dozens of brands and what it takes to actually like, I think we've had the benefit now of being able to strip it back and say, in its purest form, what needs to be there. You strip out all the fat and all the excess stuff. There's a few things that are constant in every single brand that we've gone to. And so like,
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to do is say, that's the place every brand should start then. Just the pure essence of developing people from within step by step. Start there and then build and go crazy on top of that. But by having that, at least it gives the sense that like, hey, this is kind of industry standard. It's what everybody's doing. And it gives a little confidence that I've got the basic building blocks figured out. I've got the simplest bits ready to go. So I may not have a Chipotle style budget or a Chipotle level team, but I've got at least the building blocks at restaurant 2 or 5 to get started and get my process rolling as I grow.
Yeah. And we all know that like if somebody implements something at restaurant 2 to 5, it's going to look different at 30,
100%.
right?
100%. Yeah.
But but you have it. You have that underlying system that will grow with you. That really gets you to that place where we want to be, where it's not just goodwill, but it's best for the business to live in that 80% club.
Well, and speaking of math, so much easier to start at restaurant 2 to 5 when you've got like 20 managers and you
Yeah.
like you're going to open up a new store, you need 3 or 4 more. So much easier to start there and get 80% trained from within than if you're starting with hundreds or thousands of leaders and you're like, I this is going to be a years long effort to get to 80% promoted from within. So huge advantages too to starting when you're small and having the system there that just grows as you grow. And then you don't have to worry about it when you've got 50, 100 units.
Yeah, that's right. Um, well, I think that concludes for this week.
I think it's perfect. Wraps it up so well.
We are we have a spotlight that we'll talk through next week. And yeah, but we're gonna wrap it up. Sam, I hope that have a good rest of your journey back home from this Starbucks, unless you're gonna sit in the Starbucks for a while and hang
I'm
out.
not. My car is charged. I should have enough battery to get back. We're racing between. I got a little Starbucks sandwich here. I got some
Nice.
food.
Ooh,
Not a total food snob, Matt. I
not a total
can
stop.
I can I can eat with the common folk once
Good
in a
for you.
while.
Good to
Thank you.
know.
Thank you.
Well, next, yeah, so this week, all about sort of this idea of the 80% club, and what the value, the power of that is. Next week we want to dive into kind of that underlying system and really the step by step and what that system looks like. So we're excited to dive into that before the new year. So thank you for joining, and we will talk through that next week.
Until next time now.